Hi, today I want to share with you some thoughts on the concept of woke and wokeness and how it relates to the concept of spiritual awakening. We'll start by looking at woke. Woke originally was a term that was used to describe people who became, to a degree, politically awake, that they recognized that there had been a high degree of social injustices built into our systems and our society, and they were trying to right those wrongs by making political changes that would even the playing field for people who had been wrong for many decades or longer. Over time, it's been taken on to have a much broader meaning of applying a lot of progressive causes, such that people on the right have pushed back on people on the left and used the term now woke as a pejorative to say that people are having a high degree of overreach and trying to right the wrongs by taking rights away from people, other people. My intent in this video is not to argue the correctness or incorrectness of any political position regarding wokeness, but to understand how wokeness relates to the idea of spiritual awakening. What is spiritual awakening? Well, there's this idea that we are all spiritual beings who are moving through a human journey. And there are many individuals in their human journey have had experiences where they recognize that much of the state of this material life in which we're living and moving and having our being is not the true ultimate reality. The term spiritual awakening implies a sense that we're asleep and that by going through some change, we awake. Now, we all know that experience. Each morning from our sleep, either deep sleep or dream sleep, we wake up in the morning and we understand that sort of transition that occurs from deep sleep and dreaming to being awake in our normal daily environment. That transition has a feeling that the dream state or sleep state wasn't the real state and that we're back in the real state. But what spiritual awakening implies is that this material world state that we're moving through, where we're these individuals separate and apart from one another and moving through our daily lives with a sense that I'm Mark and you're you and all of that, is not the ultimate reality either, that there is something about this that is actually a dream and that we can wake up from this state. Now, many, many spiritual seekers through the years have had experiences that have led them to a sense that this reality, our day-to-day reality, is not the ultimate reality. And when I first read about this and I thought about it, I kept thinking that I could go through an experience that would be like a light switch where I could turn the switch and I would go from seeing this world as a dream and the ultimate reality for what it was. But what I've come to understand that although there are some people who do have those experiences of awakening from the human condition into their spiritual truth, most folks who are on the spiritual path, that they wake up over a very gradual way, that there are just little experiences and learnings and knowledge and things along the path of life that allow them to recognize at a more and more and a greater level that this human experience that we're living in is not our ultimate truth. That's how my experience of awakening has been. And I know from working with a lot of people and talking with a lot of people through many years as a spiritual seeker that I found more people who have felt like their sense of awakening has occurred more on a gradual basis than on some great leap. Now, that's not to say people can't have a great leap where one moment they have an experience that takes them from this experience that we're all enmeshed in right now and foreseeing it at a much higher level. In fact, I think all of us from time to time may have little mini leaps where we have some sort of oneness experience that allows us to see through the veil of what's going on here in the third dimension. But for most of us, even if we have those experiences, the third dimension comes back on us at such veracity and mesmerizing experience in our awareness that it overtakes us and brings those experiences to where we truly wonder if they were real or not. And we're back enmeshed in the world of form and our human story and the human experiences. But the point I'm trying to get here is that a spiritual awakening is a process where we grow and evolve on a spiritual path from a sense of this human life moving to a greater life. Now, what are the key characteristics that we might consider when someone goes through a spiritual awakening? Well, one of those characteristics is that all of a sudden they move from a sense of we're separate and apart and in competition with one another, that we're little egos fighting for survival in the human realm, to recognizing that there is an interplay and interconnection of everything in the human realm, that there is some transitional or state that transforms or transcends is the word I'm looking for, that transcends this human realm, and that's our truth. And in fact, we have and bump into little momentary experiences every day in our lives where we feel like life is more than this material existence. And when we get those experiences, whether it be little psychic knowings, the intuition voices that come up, the interesting and strange coincidences that we can't explain away, things that are not explainable by science, there is so many things that are around us every day that are little keys that point at the fact that life is so much more than this material existence. And we tend to explain them away and say they're not real, and where we deny them. But those are little reminders that much more of our truth is transcending our third dimensional experience as a human being and pointing us to the fact that we are a spiritual being that transcends this state. And when we transcend that state, what do we sense? We sense oneness. We sense that everything is connected. We sense that we're not individual egos walking around in competition, but we are all aspects of the one same spirit or God, and that interconnectedness calls us to feel that sense of connectedness with other people and all of life in general, all of the world. And that sense that's calling us to connect to each other is the power of love. And so love becomes a very strong spiritual force to move us up from a sense of separation to a sense of unity. So as I've stated, one of the key factors we need to keep in mind is that we're all on the spectrum of awakening. It's a consciousness spectrum where at one end we know total oneness, that we're here for the bliss of the divine. And on the other end of the spectrum, we believe totally that we're only separate human beings moving through a human experience as little egos in competition with one another. But many people are in this middle range, floating up and floating down depending upon life experiences. And the question to ask yourself is, where are you on the spectrum? You know, I recently did a video about the fact that one of the most important spiritual practices we can do is to develop a sense of taking the perspective of other people. Because as we all look out through our senses and make judgments and decisions and discernments about the world we're living in, we do it from our own individual way in which we look at and define life. But what we have to always keep in mind that every other individualized expression of the one is making that same discernment from their own perspective. It's like we're looking at the same event, but through a different angle and a different mindset. And so that's what's happening when we have differences regarding political stuff. Somebody who has moved up the spectrum of consciousness to a higher degree of sensing the oneness and interconnectedness of everything gets to a state where they recognize that many of the social systems that we've put in the world of form are unfair to certain groups of people. And if we really believe that everything is interconnected and all is one, then we recognize that every person is valuable. Every person has something to add to the unique rainbow of this entire planet and experience of the universe that we're having. And so if everybody is valuable, then how do we seek to uplift everyone and support their value, allowing everyone to thrive? It becomes less about survival of the fittest and more towards thriving of the all. And we become socially active because we see the inequities that have been built into our systems. So that's a part of this awakening process, is to come back with that new spiritual knowledge and look at the world of form and see how we have built a world and a system that doesn't truly work for everyone. And the more we recognize the unity of all, the more we want to uplift the all. But what we also have to recognize is that there are many people who are at different spots on the spectrum of consciousness, and they look out at life and they see it differently. They're still in competition. One of the key takeaways I want to get you to get from this video and this conversation is that we are all on a spiritual path. We're all growing, we're all evolving, and we're all at a certain point on the path. Where we are on the path is where we are on the path. It's not a competition. When I say and use the words higher and lower, sometimes people can get a sense, oh, you're separating people because you're saying they're higher on the spectrum, lower on the spectrum, etc. I don't mean to imply that there is a separation there. I'm just saying that there are developmental levels that people have moved to. But at the base level, we're all one. What we have to recognize then is that because we're all individually on our paths and at different levels, how can we see the unity in the multiplicity? How can we move beyond the fact that unity doesn't mean uniformity, that we look out at life and people are where they are, and they're right for where they are in their lives, and we have to honor that's where they are. And it's not about making ourselves better than other people or making ourselves worse than other people. It's not a competition. We're all where we are, and we have to honor that where we are is perfect for us for our individualized spiritual journeys. So don't get into this comparison thing by comparing yourself with others, because that's ego-driven. That's driven by a state of divisiveness and disunity. If you're truly moving up to the state of oneness consciousness and moving to a state of non-dual reality, what you do is look beyond the differences, that recognize that in the world of form, we may be playing out at different levels on our individual spiritual paths, but ultimately behind that is the unity. I truly believe that the evolution of our consciousness is leading from a sense of separation to a sense of unity. It's moving us from a sense of fear to a sense of love. And the world I wish to see created, in my mind, is one where we continue to grow and evolving in that area. And I hope that by sharing a few thoughts about the interrelationship between woke and spiritual awakening, that this has been helpful for you in moving you along that path as well.